Let's call a spade a spade. Another handheld, another day, and every time I am face to face with one of those devices, I probably, like many of you, ask myself, should I pull the trigger? Before we jump right in, hurry up while you still can, put me on pause and go grab one for yourself because it is a keeper. And without further ado, let's jump straight into how it feels, what it does, and why you should procure one for yourself. We're starting off strong with this statement. The feel of this console is second to none. You may have heard me talk about plastic in previous videos to the risk of sounding zealous. I find these subtleties matter. The feel of a device is part of the things that makes us forget we are even holding them to begin with. In other words, it contributes to an immersive experience. If you should subscribe to this channel for one specific aspect, it's that I'm all about having immersive an experience as can be and want to make sure I transmit my findings to you guys, and deliver it does. The plastic feels so premium, it has a bit of a texture that is effectively very efficient at preventing fingerprints. It has what feels like an extra coating that provides a wee bit of grittiness. I can't quite put the finger on another product shell that has a similar sensation. Retroid nailed it out of the park, and I hope to see that material on future ones as well. From glare alone, it looks like the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, but I assure you, it feels different. The buttons also feel quite similar, and to that effect, the D-pad is the exact same. An excellent dome switch that provides a great mix of responsiveness, but without being overly stiff. The face buttons mix it up by being membrane style, and while at first glance, one could think it feels like other Retroid handhelds, I have found that it's somewhere between the stiffness of the RP3 Plus and the softness of the Retroid Flip. Personally, they are my favorite out of the three devices, and they are double colored mold injections, which means that your face buttons will never fade out. Next, we have the shoulders, L1 and R1, which can easily be pushed from anywhere. They also sit higher than the triggers, making them very easy to press. Arguably, if you have meaty fingers, you may find them ever so slightly in the way. For me personally, it's at the very edge between ease of reach and accidental push, which I've had zero so far, which ultimately makes the design choice a positive. If you've experienced the Retroid Flip, these L2 and R2 are essentially the same one and one of their best upgrade versus the RP3 Plus, but they are also wider and longer, which makes them even better. And last but not least, before talking about the analogs, are every other buttons. Finally, Retroid has normal placement for select, start, volume, power, and they even have two dedicated Android buttons and one mappable, which we'll address shortly. Honestly, it is an upgrade on every front. From a comfort and convenience perspective, it is by far the best that Retroid has put out. But then those sticks are S tier. How is it that it took Retroid to put concave analog small sticks? And not only that, the material feels awesome. The closest to these you'll find in the wild are on the Kishi V1. Even Razer did an absolute move of going from those to those. Why? They are both clickable, so L3, R3 are present, and I'm happy to report that they feel nothing short of awesome with no overly aggressive snapping to the axis on my part. I will say, however, that I am not able to obtain the full square motion on every corner. For the most part, it shouldn't be an issue, but there may be very few games where it is. One thing not listed in the official specs is the 3.5mm jack actually supports both stereo and microphone. So if you wanted to use Discord with this bad boy, your headset will work. And then a micro SD card, a micro HDMI out, two front firing speakers, a 40,000 milliamp hour battery, and a small rumble motor. It even has subjective telepathy capabilities. For example, the Retroid Pocket 2S is sending waves through the screen right now to your noggin to tell you to hit the like button, to comment how much you love it, and smash that subscribe button to not miss any future content. Oh, you are such a naughty little retro handheld. I love you, RP2S. Okay, so by now you may be aware that this thing runs on Android 11, which, as of the making of this video, there are no updates, and I think it's fair to assume that outside of community support, I wouldn't expect that to change beyond what it currently is. You'll also find Retroid specific Android settings. One in particular is input. It'll let you change your front-facing buttons, layout from Nintendo to Xbox style, change L2, R2 behavior from analog to digital, or both, map your customizable buttons to Android functions such as back, home, and a few more options. It's also where you'd go to calibrate your sticks and or triggers. And in case you're wondering, the buttons are not physically swappable as the notches wouldn't align, which was easily confirmed from looking through this clear green case. Another cool feature is the mouse mode, which lets you transform your game controls into a mouse and pre-mapped keyboard keys. You have settings such as sensitivity, assign keys to function, and can map a shortcut to quickly activate or deactivate this feature. This turned out to be much more fleshed out than I would have expected. So much so that I've been using this thing without almost ever touching the screen. Now, that's impressive. You can map it to a key, which I have to select plus start, hold it 3 seconds, and it'll make you swap in and out of the function. As we dive a bit more into internal hardware, starting with one of my favorites, the rumble. So what we have here is more akin to a cell phone haptic unit than a rumble like what you'd find in controllers. And while opinions may differ, I don't mind the haptics from cell phones. In fact, I prefer them to cheap rumble motors that you find on third-party controllers. Sure, they don't pack the same punch, but from a sensory perspective, I find they carry the vibrations better. Let's address the 2 out of 3 quote-unquote aspects that are less appealing. Number 1 is the speakers, and you'll come to find that this is a recurring theme. They do absolutely fine a job for what they are designed for, and I think that is intentional. Allow me to elaborate. If you are gonna watch Netflix, YouTube, Prime Videos, music, using the RP2S speakers, it's not the best. Like, you'd want proper headphones for that, or earbuds for sure. But let's be real, it isn't its focus either. What it is designed for is gaming, primarily, and more specifically, retro gaming. And when doing retro gaming, where the music and sound is not as rich, and I mean in bitrate, this does a fantastic job. As little as I know, I do come from a family of musicians, and I know enough to grasp the infinite complexity of audio. I'll never have a definitive answer, obviously, but if someone were to tell me that Retroid carefully picked these speakers to replicate 8-bit and 16-bit audio, I'd believe it. Classics from my childhood sound as I remember them. Games like Fox Xanadu, Super Mario World, Cyborg Justice, to name but a few, take me back to older times when coming out of these speakers. However, the moment you jump into disc era, I find that richness in reproduction falls, and then I want my headphones. As you've been warned, the theme repeats itself with the screen. Warning, a hot take is about to be addressed. At first glance, I wasn't impressed when first powering it up. Colors felt washed out. Immediately, my mind went to, oh, that's where they game to hit that sub 100 price tag. And then I powered some retro games and I was like, wait, something doesn't add up. It's not washed out at all. I don't know what kind of wizard does product engineering at Retroid, but it feels like some of those decisions are very much intentional because darn it, I'm gonna say it. Retroid is making me believe more than many companies making those handhelds lately that they understand their core audience. It's like it transforms when it plays those retro games. I don't know how else to say this. And again, go watch Netflix or YouTube with that panel and say hello to color bending, washed out colors. And for the shocking part, I find the panel to be superior to the RP3 Plus. Sure, the latter has beautiful PPI, is bright, more vibrant in general, but I also see some invert ghosting on it. Maybe it's me, or the screen is not a steady 60 FPS, I don't know. To be honest, I haven't bothered seeking out why, but as far as I'm concerned, minus the size, I prefer the screen on the RP2S, at least for what that device is designed to do, or should I say what use I make of it. Then there's the screen ratio, and of course the RP2S is less likely to run into black bars up until 16:9 generations, after which there is a substantial diminishing return, but overall, I don't mind black bars all that much. Same goes with the resolution at 480p. It's fine for most content this will end up playing. Some consoles can benefit from a bit of an upconverting, and indeed, this device won't do the best of jobs to showcase that upscaling. It's also something I can do without when doing those older games for authenticity. I'll keep the performance talk to a minimum as I'm joining the review crew late with this one, and believe me, that much of those questions have been addressed. In a nutshell, anything up to Dreamcast in consoles and PSP in handhelds is pretty much a guaranteed to work kind of scenario. Maybe the occasional tweaks here and there, but for the most part, it'll boot without much, and not say any effort at all. DS was also quite flawless, using Drastic, which is a ping emulator on the Play Store. The issue is not so much the capability as much as just the size and format of the screen, but you could, if you wanted, just focus on the games where one screen at a time is enough. When going into GameCube and PS2, your mileage may vary. If you don't mind the tweaking, I did find a fair amount of success with GameCube titles. I was quite surprised, in fact, but PS2 was a different story and seemed overall harder to achieve acceptable FPS. Anything past that was met with massive slowdowns, hiccups, crashes. That goes for 3DS, Vita, and Wii. Some exceptions are out there, but skimming through the playables and non-playables could be quite the undertaking for what would most likely be a very low success rate. I'd recommend against buying that handheld specifically to play these generations or more. Keep in mind, this unit is the 4GB of RAM. I don't believe that it should have much of an impact in the late tier of emulation that this retro console can dish out. Or if it does, it would be so very few titles that it's hard to justify grabbing that model for that reason specifically. Instead, I would invest in the higher tier device if you know that native Android gaming is a thing you'll do a lot of, or if you prefer to have as many apps as possible running simultaneously. In my opinion, the largest incentive to grab the 4GB over the entry model is if you care for 128GB of storage instead of 32GB. That's the difference between needing an SD card and not doing so. That $20 would still translate into more storage per dollar spent, but it all comes down to convenience. We've established the RP2S is nothing short of a home run, and sure, more performance is always welcome. A bigger screen is also always welcome, but I think this device not only provides more than enough, it also addresses a niche inside a niche, which is a smaller form factor with exceptional performance for what it is meant to be running. That leaves a few more things to talk about, starting with Android native games. First, Play Store was present, no side loading required, and for most games, they did not require side loadings either, but that will entirely depend on the titles you expect to play. I tested Call of Duty, Diablo Immortal, Genshin Impact, and Tower of Fantasy. It's impressive just how much local Android gaming this chip can put up, and with the mapping software, you have an immensely capable tool to have as diverse an experience as you could wish for. While I don't think that this is the device to get for that specifically, you can definitely use it for that as well, for nearly everything but the absolute most demanding game. Like, for example, Genshin Impact. Can you? Yes. Should you? No. Moving on to streaming. Anything local will do an overall okay job, but don't expect to have to down-convert your signal too much, as this will potentially slow down your performance. For example, having a 4K local stream being down-converted to 480p is too much workload and caused hiccups in my testings. With that said, a 1080p signal is proven to be no issues at all. The other issue brings it back to the theme we had earlier, and I don't believe streaming to be the cause of this. This panel is just not designed to showcase the complexity of modern games. The shadow work, ambient occlusion, textures, pixel density, as long as it is not pushed to its limit, everything works well, and a 5 GHz band is plenty to support a nearly latency-free, steady 60 FPS feed. In other words, it all comes down to the equipment you use to provide yourself with great local streaming, after which you could also do 4x3 native using a local rig. When using xCloud and GeForce, now performance are overall good and more dependent on your ping to each services, but aspect ratio may be more problematic. So in a pinch, can you stream using this? Of course you can. Can you set a small PC with a HDMI dummy plug and broadcast a 4x3 signal to your Retroid Pocket 2S? No one's stopping you from achieving greatness. But is that the device to do it? I don't believe that it is. It's just too much to ask of it, and with the absolute danger of quoting Blizzard many years after drama ensued, don't you have phones? If you do, stream on that instead. You'll have an infinitely superior experience. Also, while I won't talk a whole lot about it, the RP2S is equipped with a micro HDMI out. It's a feature obviously not mandatory, but seeing just how good it is, it does make it one of the better handhelds for which it makes the most sense in my many years of buying retro consoles. With the built-in mouse mode, it also makes it viable to plug and operate from the couch, as when plugged in, the in-body panel shuts off, and with it, the touchscreen capabilities do go away. The signal coming out of the device does match the panel, so 640 by 480p. Some TVs and monitors will do a finer job at displaying that signal, or in fact, some panels may have difficulty displaying it at all. In my personal testings, it's been an amazing experience and one that made sense to me, more than any other device before it. Before we head on to our last subject, let's address battery. I measured up to 8 watt at once going to the battery, which translates to little less than 3 hours from 0 to 100% charge. Since there is no fast charge of any kind, 0 to 50% will take you nearly half of that, and indeed clocking it at 1 hour 15 minutes to do exactly that, the numbers seem accurate. As for draining the battery, the chip is overall extremely efficient, and even under heavy load, you're in for a couple hours at the very least. Honestly, because it can take so little current, you'd have no problems charging this with a small battery bank. In other words, if ever you have batteries issues on this device, that's on you, because it can easily be remedied for dirt cheap. And with that, it leaves but one thing to address: the overall comfort. I was quite happy with the Retroid Pocket 2S the moment I put it in my hands, and part of this review is extremely subjective, but I have to say, as far as I'm concerned, this is the very first Retroid handheld for which I would strongly recommend the grip. The RP3 Plus grip was fine, but the ergonomics weren't quite there, and so it was with the flip grip. They both share the same design flaws, which is that while the hold on the device does improve, it does not snug into palms. In short, it addresses one issue, but increases one as well, making it so that you're simply better off without one. The RP2S grip manages to improve on both fronts, and in bonus does a fantastic job at imitating the feel of the shell, which makes it the one reason why I consider it to be superior. You know, for the cost of $100 or $120 for the 4GB model, it really is a device that achieves much, but with only sacrificing so little. And if you don't mind paying a bit extra for my US brothers and sisters down south, you can now grab it on Amazon, which I'll leave a link for down below. Hopefully my fellow Canadians will have this opportunity soon as well, but you might be tempted to wait for the metal version, which Retroid hinted. This device is also very popular, so you won't have any problems finding much support online, be it from amazing channels like Retro Handhelds, Retro Game Core, and a bunch of smaller ones like me. Your options are diverse. And last but not least, sure, the Odin 2 is going to be a massive performance champ, but it is not the same price, it is not the same size, and let's be honest, why stop at one if you can have both? Am I right? But seriously though, it's a fun console to own, and any collection wouldn't be complete without it. Don't let it pass you by. With this review behind us, it makes me realize that just as we spend lifetimes chasing perfection, but in the end, just as we tell our children, it never is about being perfect as a whole, as it is unachievable. But they know that in my heart, in my eyes, they are perfect to me. And so I'm still excited for future handheld children to join this family, but my RP2S can sleep soundly as that kid has a home for as long as it needs. The last major problem with this amazing one, and the one that I recommend watching, which I reviewed the other day, how do I even find the strength to put them down and take a bit of time to talk about them? Believe me, I had to muster up all the strength in the world. Be careful with watching that other video. You may find yourself wanting that one as well. Cheers.